I'm Dan Rundy. I'm a Senior Vice President here at CSIS. I'm really, really, really pleased to be hosting my friend Fawzia Koofi. Fawzia Koofi is a female politician in Afghanistan. She's been a glass ceiling breaker. She's somebody who has gone through a lot. She lost her husband to the Taliban. She has survived a number of assassination attempts. She's gone through a lot. She's been a women politician in a country that is learning to bring all voices of the society into full participation in the society. She's someone I really like and I really admire. And I'm really grateful that she agreed to become a visiting fellow with us here at CSIS. And so we're so happy that she's here for the month of October. She's someone I really admire and look up to. It's important to have people you admire in public life, and Fawzia is one of the people I most admire in public life. So I'm really happy to have her today. This is as part of a series of discussions that we've been having. It's the third that we've had in the last 6 weeks around the fall of the legitimate government in Afghanistan, the takeover by the Taliban a year ago. So I'm really happy to have her here today. I'm not going to say much more than that. I'm going to turn it over to my friend Fawzia and let you make some remarks. You can either do it here or from there, either one. Maybe, yeah.
No, thank you so much, Dan, for the opportunity and for the platform, because I know it's probably very difficult now for Afghan as a whole, but for Afghan women to get a stage with all the attention shifted from Afghanistan to another awful situations. When I was in Europe, I was like contacting my Afghan friends in the United States and asking them to meet the members of Congress, State Department, think tanks, organizations like yourself, and ask them to do, tangible things for Afghanistan. And they were telling me there is not much of interest for many of Americans. Afghanistan project is kind of died. It's no longer an area where Americans want to keep an eye. And I couldn't believe it, because after all those lives and blood and treasure you have invested to help us being in the full front of all of it, how could you just turn eye from what's happening in Afghanistan? And to the women especially. But now being here, I can kind of imagine that, I can see that that the world, that the US has other priorities now, and Afghanistan is no longer a priority, which is heartbreaking, because how could you, repeat the history of not very long ago, only 20 years back, when you abandoned and forgotten Afghanistan, the consequences of that was not only on the Afghans, but on yourself, was huge, was a threat to the global security. You lost more than 3,500 lives. Afghans lost millions of lives. And the 11th September attack happened. My worry is that, at this situation, if we really don't keep the attention in Afghanistan, I'm not saying that that you will see the 11th September experience. What I'm saying is that all, whatever is happening in Afghanistan is shaping itself toward the future where, with the current situation, the current status quo, where the world global security might be at risk. So thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. I think there's a lot of anger and shame and confusion in the United States about what happened in Afghanistan, and so I think we'd rather not deal with those emotions. I think is a lot of it, and then I think we've been very consumed by the COVID pandemic, and I think the war in Ukraine has been something that understandably has absorbed a lot of attention here in Washington. But I remember that film Charlie Wilson's War and the book Charlie Wilson's War, and the end of that movie. I'm not going to repeat what they say at the end of the movie, but it's not safe for work, so I'm not going to repeat what they say at the end of that movie. But I think if you haven't seen it, go out back and watch it. It's exactly what my friend Fawzia Koofi said. And so I think there's a strong temptation for us to forget and just look the other way and hope maybe we may not be interested in Afghanistan, but the events in Afghanistan may become interested in us, and we can't necessarily build a wall high enough to protect ourselves from those sorts of dangers. So we're going to have to remain engaged. I know we hosted the special representative for Afghanistan last week, Tom West. And he talked about all the ways in which the United States remains involved, but I do think we are, I worried, we did a paper here at CSIS several years ago that said exactly what you're saying, Fawzia, that if we leave, that we may have to at some point, and I hope it doesn't happen, we may, under some sort of circumstances, be forced to have to re-engage in Afghanistan in ways we don't really want to. So I agree with you, and I think we have an ongoing variety of interests in Afghanistan. Some of it is because we were there, but I think there's a security interest. But I also think we have other interests as well, and I want to get to some of those. So one of the interests I think we have is we made major investments in supporting women leaders and investing in women and girls in Afghanistan. Several million girls went through kindergarten through 12th grade. And what I've said all along is that investment will radically change the society in Afghanistan. If you look at a country like Bangladesh, another South Asian country, the investments in women and girls have totally positively transformed Bangladesh. Bangladesh is on its way to becoming an upper middle income country, and you could argue that there's a direct correlation between the investments in women and girls, especially girls, the number of years of education of girls in Bangladesh to sort of the positive economic outcomes that have happened in Bangladesh. Right now, under the Taliban, girls cannot go to school after, what, 9th grade or 8th grade?
6th grade.
6th grade. I mean, it's barbaric. It's ridiculous. It's outrageous. And so how do we get girls back in school?
Well, girls not being in school is one of the hundreds of challenges people of Afghanistan face today. But the fact that girls don't go to school explains the ecosystem of how women are living in Afghanistan. The fact that it's a clear benchmark of oppression and gender apartheid, obviously. Women don't go to school, and ultimately they don't go to work. They won't get to university next year. And in fact, this year, Taliban banned many girls from going to universities or entering the university entrance exam. They assigned specific faculties where women could get into. So they can't get into journalism faculty, they can't get into law faculty, they can't get into engineering faculty, because these are not regarded as, from Taliban perspective, traditionally a job that is traditionally fit for women. So I think, yes, we talk about girls' education because, from my own personal experience, when Taliban stopped me, and I can see a lot of, the young Afghan girls here who were also stopped either from their primary school or university during Taliban, that it took me 20 years to recap.
To catch up.
To catch the time that I was not allowed to go to university, 5 years. I wanted to become a medical doctor, but they stopped me, along with millions of other girls and women in Afghanistan. And after Taliban collapsed, it took me 20 years to be where I wanted to be, and just started, kind of walking on my own feet when this happened. So it's not going to be even, the UN report also says that the fact that women are not going to work actually impacted Afghanistan's economy by a huge percentage. They say that $5 billion, it impacted Afghanistan $5 billion for the fact that they are not allowing women to go to work. And we are now talking about a country which is almost 40 million people are at risk of severe poverty. So why are we depriving women? It's not even a social or political issue. It is a matter of security, because if any government is oppressive enough, that is oppressing 55% of its society, which are women and girls, to the corner and depriving them from their basic rights, they can pave the way for any other military extremism or any other extremism. And my fear is that now all the ground is paved for military extremists to come back, because there is oppression. And Taliban, since they came to power, their only priority is women's rights. Oppressive measures against women, basically.
Right. Their priority is anti-women's rights.
Anti-women's rights. They have issued 32 verdicts and edicts minimizing women's rights, as if women freedom and liberty is the only problem in Afghanistan. And if you really oppress women to the walls of their homes, Afghanistan will become a garden of flowers with all the prosperous future, which is not. We are talking about a country that women were already suffering. So you can imagine the amount of, the amount of frustration in Afghanistan, not only from women, but from everyone who is living there.
How did you lived under the Taliban? Your husband was killed, in essence, because of his treatment by the Taliban. You were widowed because of this. What was it like living under the Taliban, and how did you get educated? What happened?
I was born in a very traditional family, although my father was a member of parliament, but he never allowed his own daughters to go to school. I was the first to go to school because my mother helped me. And they say that if a woman is educated, she will educate her society. And that's why we believe girls' education is the key in Afghanistan. And then eventually, because of whatever I have gone through as a woman, experiences in my life, facing discrimination, facing injustice, I could see women around me, but also men around me, were suffering from wrong politics, of exclusionary politics by Taliban, but also during civil war, but mainly by Taliban. I could see that women are being whipped in the streets for not wearing the standard appropriate clothes of Taliban. And I was thinking that something is wrong here, because there is a social contract between people and the government, and on the basis of that social contract, there is mutual accountability. And Taliban were not committed to that, not at all. And they're not committing now to that, accountability towards people. And that drove me to politics, actually. After 11 September attack and the United States commitment that they will help people of Afghanistan achieve democracy, which eventually they also failed, I went to politics. For me, politics was just a means of change. And therefore, when I was elected, and I think anybody, when you are elected in the office, that's the first step for you to achieve what you want to achieve, your dreams, for your country, for your people. Getting to office was not my objective. It was a means to do what I wanted to do. And it was not easy path, Dan. I mean, I remember from the time that we were even not allowed to speak what we wanted to speak in the parliament. The mics were cut. We were never regarded. This is 2005, 2006, in the first democratically elected parliament after 40 years of war. So these were not easy experience. People could talk about our clothing, etc. So we really had to struggle, pave the way. Sometimes when people talk about democracy was imported to Afghanistan, I disagree, because we really stood in full front of protecting what we wanted to. Women were in the full front of all of that, starting from parliament to civil society to the rural Afghanistan. And in fact, when I was traveling to the rural villages in Afghanistan, people will usually, they were following closely politics in the world, and they were so aware, thanks to the media, about what's happening. So that was like the transformation I could see. Women were asking me in the villages that, who is going to be the United States president next time? Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or President Barack Obama? It indicated, how women were aware of what's happening in the world and how they wanted to be part of all the progress, and they were part of the progress. So for me, politics was a beginning to start to change and transform the society. Every woman and man who actually worked in Afghanistan in the last 20 years, no matter they were in politics, civil society, they were part of that transformation. And that is something I wanted to deliver to Taliban. I wanted to tell them that Afghanistan is a transformed Afghanistan. It's not Afghanistan that they took over in 1996. That, people thought it was okay if a woman is whipped in the street and didn't react. Now you see that when, for instance, our 50 Hazara girls were killed last week in a act of genocide, basically, against Hazaras and against everyone who is living in Afghanistan. Not only women, but also men protested in the streets. But women were, of course, leading these protests, asking for Afghanistan, for a better Afghanistan. I think they deserve our solidarity. I think they deserve for us to stand with them. If they are risking their lives, remember, Afghanistan is so different with Iran. In Afghanistan, everyone has a gun. Everyone is, who has a gun, ultimately believe in use of violence against women, especially Taliban, which are a minority of 10 to whatever percent. 10% probably oppressing the people. They were using guns and violence against these women protesters. They were asking a better Afghanistan. That is, I think, a seed that we cultivated in the last 20 years, that we can see now it's growing. But before it dies, my plea to the world is, before it dies, let's continue to help them. Let's continue to help them achieve what they want to, a better Afghanistan. Our plea is very simple. We don't want women of Afghanistan to look like the women in the United States or in Europe. We want our basic fundamental rights. A right to go to school, to go to work, a right to be able to have a say in the future of your country and live in a society which is equal.
Does the United States, do other countries have leverage in this situation? And if so, what is it?
I must say that the US and European leverage is getting smaller and smaller day by day. because Taliban have now learned how to maneuver the regional politics. So they have new allies. We know that Russia, for instance, was the first country to offer Taliban's the embassy. They accepted the first, they gave accepted credential of Taliban diplomat. China is, of course, in Afghanistan. They have a lot of economic interest. Central Asian countries in Afghanistan. So these are kind of a potential substitute, I would say, for US and for Europe, and which could minimize your leverage before it's too late. I'm saying again, before it's too late, you also have leverage. Your leverage is the people of Afghanistan who believe in a different Afghanistan, the women of Afghanistan who could be your partner. Don't regard women of Afghanistan just as victims and survivors. Regard them as your partners, because you have empowered, they have empowered themselves. Regard them as your power. So I don't like this word of sympathy when we share our problem. We hear this sympathetic words of like, we're sorry for you. Act beyond being sorry. Act in solidarity with people of Afghanistan, with women of Afghanistan. Remember, in 2013, Taliban were nowhere. In 20 years, they fought, they were not able to control one district. Only in 2021, when the American deal was signed, which demoralized our forces, and it's a different story, probably needs another conversation, that they managed to control our areas. But for 20 years, they were not able to control even one district in Afghanistan, right? So they were nowhere, but there was a political office for them established. And Afghanistan was the only country in the world represented by two flags. Now you see, if Taliban were nowhere and they were brought to become a political force, women of Afghanistan, civil society of Afghanistan, the transformed part of Afghanistan, I'm repeating again, that you guys invested blood and treasure. They are ready for partnership with you for a different Afghanistan. Use that, use your money. Because I know that, there is this tendency that, people of Afghanistan are hungry, we need to help them, we need to give them money, which is good. Thank you so much for that. But look at beyond the humanitarian issue. Look at the political situation. And also your other leverages, work with region. Impose sanctions, because we never actually use our political leverage against Taliban. It was either fight or friendship. There was no middle ground. Use those sanctions. Travel ban. I hope that the US does not really request the removal of travel ban, because I'm hearing that some of the diplomats are asking actually travel ban removal for Taliban to be able to travel to some of the countries. While as an Afghan woman, as somebody who holds Afghanistan passport, when I came to the United States, I was picked as a selectee for a very in-depth search, security search. I wonder if Taliban undergo the same security check with all these private jets, and while they're in the FBI list of sanction, in UN list of sanction, can we bring some of those measures so that women they could put themselves in their feet in the shoes of women of Afghanistan and feel the pain?
So you'd ask for everyone that comes from the Taliban to go through a DHS search. I agree with that, Fawzia. It's a horrible process, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. But Fawzia, in terms of, there are a number of things that have been announced. Secretary Blinken recently announced the Alliance for Afghan Women's Economic Resilience, and I think it's linked to how we can figure out a way both economically and politically to construct a representative process for Afghanistan, for voices inside and outside Afghanistan. So could you talk about Secretary Blinken's Alliance for Afghan Women's Economic Resilience? What do you think about that? And then could you talk about what's it going to take to have a representative process for Afghan voices inside Afghanistan to be more heard?
So on the initiatives, there are two initiatives. One is the consultative mechanism, and then the other one is the Allies for Economic Support. Any initiative, we welcome it. I wish these initiatives were undertaken just before the collapse, because I know that 2-3 years before the collapse, women were kind of forgotten. And when in my conversation with the US diplomats or other women conversation, when we were asking that why in the Doha deal there was no mention of human rights and women's rights, as your partners, the answer we got was like, our soldiers are not here to shed blood to protect women's rights in Afghanistan, which probably makes sense because women and human rights have never been a geostrategic issue, in the basis of which the world will plan their foreign policy. I understand that. But we embolden the women of Afghanistan to the extent that we put them at risk. And then all of a sudden we left them. Honestly, they felt betrayal. Now, moving forward, these initiatives, they must be really focusing inside Afghanistan directly to those women organizations who are led by women. Because a lot of women who lost their jobs, they were the breadwinners of their family. Their husbands, brothers, male member of the family were killed in the war, in our joint efforts to protect our values. They were killed, and they are now left with no means of support. And Taliban have asked them to leave the job because the public jobs are not for these women. They're only for Taliban, by Taliban, for Taliban. They're not for these women. So these initiatives are important. But I think one has to really see the whole situation, as I said before, the whole ecosystem of Afghanistan, which is a political settlement. Without using your leverage for a political settlement in a time which the ground is prepared, Taliban are divided. You can use all of these opportunities for a political dialogue.
Talk about the Taliban being divided, because we read about this. I asked Special Representative West about this. He didn't want to talk about it publicly, but I'd like you to talk about it publicly. How is the Taliban split?
They are. I mean, being a rebel group fighting in the mountain is the easiest thing probably for Taliban because they are a group of fighters. But once they came to power, of course, there are differences over power, over who is controlling more resources, who is controlling more, security institutions, who is more oppressive, who is more extreme on their views. So they have split. There are three kind of Taliban. One is, of course, the Kandahar kind of Durrani branch, which some of them were in Doha in political office. Then you have the Haqqani, and then you have the leader, which is Mullah Haibatullah. Mullah Haibatullah seemed to be more traditional. I'm not sure if he's educated or not. But
have you met him?
No, luckily.
Luckily.
He was, nobody has seen his face. So we don't really know if he exists as a human being. We just know his name. So he's in Kandahar. He's surrounded by this group of traditional people who don't believe in girls' education, and they believe this is against our tradition, this is against our religion, while we know that in some of the very conservative provinces also people protest against girls not being to school. So they are actually probably claiming some other Afghanistan, maybe 200 years back, that we don't even remember, that they are trying to claim. And then you have the Haqqani network, which portray themselves as progressive, but I don't think they mean it because they want to really have a good relationship with the world. They want to whitewash their faces, so they want to say what the world wants to hear. And then you have the Durranis. So these are like our leverage point over Taliban.
There's three, and do you think you were part of the Doha process? You talk about, the question I asked Mr. West last week was, did the Taliban lie during that process? Did they lie to us? Did they lie to you?
I think they did create a narrative that we as international community, you guys, and we as people in Afghanistan seem to believe that.
We wanted to believe it.
We wanted to believe it, and we are now all trapped into this narrative. The narrative was that there are Taliban 2.0, that they have changed, and they actually said it. And I have been public about this, and I think it's safe to say this. In one of the dialogues, one of the Taliban, who is now among the 11 people who signed the verdicts on burqa, forced hijab. He is the minister now in the cabinet of Taliban. He, in one of the dialogues, say that from their perspective, a woman can be minister, foreign minister, prime minister. I'm quoting him.
But he signed a thing saying.
And then, not that only they didn't keep that promise, but he is one of the signatories that signed this deal, and he's the minister of one of the important ministries in a good relationship with China, I must say.
I'm sorry to stop you, Fawzia, but what you're saying is during the Doha process, before they took over, he was saying all sorts of sort of progressive things, and then he turned around and signed the statement. Signed
a statement that basically put women in a situation that they have to all cover their faces. That's Taliban's favorite hijab, which is even not Islamic, I must say, because there is no agreement about what is hijab in Islam, right? But the Taliban kind of interpretation of hijab as a burqa is not Islamic. It is traditional, but in very, very remote areas. And why would a government enforce, tradition of a specific area over all the population? It doesn't work in the 21st century. I feel heartbroken when I'm talking about all of this, and people listen to it without, kind of using their leverage to help us. But anyways, they have, he has signed this verdict along with 11 people. Now, my request in the UN Security Council last week was very simple. If they don't allow women of Afghanistan to travel, and interestingly, they ask the male member of the family, if a woman gets out of the home without, the standard Taliban hijab, the man will be punished. So literally, they are asking the abusers of the woman to abuse the woman. If not, they will be abused and punished. So my plea was very simple. If they don't allow women of Afghanistan, they should not have the liberty to travel. Are we asking a lot?
It's crazy. It's just crazy. Okay. Do you see any credible alternative to the Taliban emerging
There are
soon?
many. Where were Taliban in 2013? They were not even an alternative. There are many. The first alternative is the women of Afghanistan, because now women of Afghanistan are the most organized force, natural resistance force against Taliban. If they don't speak, if they don't protest in the streets, that does not mean they are happy. We are receiving calls and messages from women across Afghanistan, from south to east, north to west. Everyone is asking for some sort of liberty. Everyone is asking for a life with dignity. These are women in Kandahar. We have a man in Kandahar who is actually, kind of started a campaign to let girls go to school. And a lot of women are joining. My province used to be one of the most liberal provinces. Now, women in that province cannot go to school. So there are alternatives. Women of Afghanistan are the main alternative, I would say. Work with them, regard them as your partner. Open office for them, the same way that you supported the office of Taliban in Qatar. Open an office for them in Qatar.
It's a great idea.
Second, the civil society and the political community of Afghanistan. Yes, we are not happy with what the political community of Afghanistan divided themselves, and as a result of which Taliban managed to lever that and come to power. But, there are new faces, new generation, an empowered generation. And of course, there are others who have made difficult choices of fighting Taliban militarily, which we don't disown them. They have a choice, because some of them are actually former security forces, and the Seagull report yesterday says that a lot of these former security forces joined either ISIS or military resistance of different platforms against Taliban. So women, the people of Afghanistan, are alternative. Give them the same platform you gave to Taliban and see how they deal Afghanistan, they manage.
You and I have talked often about the role of religious leaders. This is a very religious society. I think in the West, we are sort of at least certainly among elites, it's largely a post-religious elite. And so I think we'd rather talk about anything other than religion, or it's something we get very, very uncomfortable talking about, even in a country like the United States that was, in essence, founded by religious dissidents. It's an uncomfortable topic at times. And so when I went to Afghanistan in 2019, I asked to meet with people who were not supporters of the democratically elected government. And so I met with a religious leader in Kabul, a prominent one, and I said, so could you imagine a prime minister of Afghanistan being a woman someday? And he said, no, that's not Islamic. I said, I don't understand that, sir. I said, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, all Islamic societies have had women leaders as prime ministers, so tell me, why is that? And he just kind of ignored me. So I do think, could you talk a little bit about this issue of how do we engage religious leaders? Because as you've said, there's a spectrum of views within Islam on this, and so I do think there would be a lot there. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think the Muslim society, the Islamic countries, the OIC, but also other countries, they have a huge responsibility to counter what Taliban narrative is. Taliban narrative is not Islamic, and it's going to create further Islamophobia. if they continue to, oppress and suppress the nation under the name of Islam. And honestly, in a lot of these military extremist groups that have, started in 21st century in different countries, because they ran out of, ideas about how they manage a country socially, how they manage a country politically, what is their economic policy, the easy narrative they try to find for themselves is oppress women. If you look at a lot of military extremist groups who have taken power by military means, that's a very easy entry point to oppress women and then get popularity. If you ask them, what is your financial policy? What is your economic policy? What is your social policy? How are you going to run the country? The same way if you ask Taliban, they won't have answer for any of these. So I think it's a responsibility for OIC member states, and their silence, I must say, is frustrating the people of Afghanistan. They recently sent a delegation of 10 people to Afghanistan, 1 woman included. Taliban, of course, their answer was clear. Their Islam is very unique. They think it's very different from the rest of the world. And in fact, they have started abolishing some of the laws that are made in Afghanistan before I was born even. And these are the referral point for these laws are Islamic countries like Egypt. Our civil code and our penal code is developed based on the Egyptian civil code. But Taliban now abolished that because they think it's anti-Islamic. So it's a very different version of Islam. In many occasions, I think it's in contradiction with Islam. And that's why I think the role of actual religious scholars is very, very important, that they counter this narrative. They counter, and we had several, discussions and series of programs on involving religious scholars. I think the OIC must be vocal on this. Many countries think that, that if these countries think that Taliban are protecting Islam, they're making a mistake. They have, in fact, Taliban have inspired a lot of military extremist groups that are there in every country, and especially like in some of these Muslim countries, you have that. Pakistani Taliban recently said that they want Islamic Emirate of Pakistan. The same way you have in Central Asia, you have now Tariq Taliban Tajikistan, who have actually announced themselves to start working after Taliban took over. You have the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, IMU, that actually operates in Afghanistan. Just before Taliban take over, there were 22 military extremist groups that were operating between South Asia, Central Asia, and Afghanistan.
And there was something like 19 just in Afghanistan operating.
19 just in Afghanistan. They have now increased, expanded, because they're inspired the way Taliban took over. So they're going to be a threat to their elected or whatever government in power is. So before that happens, I think these Islamic countries, and especially the OIC, has a responsibility, as I said before, to counter this narrative and to stand with people of Afghanistan. Because, I mean, in nowhere in the world, women are deprived from their work rights, from their education rights, because in fact, the right to education is a fundamental right in Islam.
So let me just list, I've said this a couple of times, and so I think if I'm the Emir of Qatar, or I'm the Prime Minister of Pakistan, or I'm the King of Saudi, or the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, if any of those folks want to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize, and many leaders do in countries all over the world would like to someday win the Nobel Peace Prize for something, it has struck me that those leaders could win the Nobel Peace Prize if they could help women get back into school in Afghanistan. I have been listening to this wonderful statement. Thank you for advocating for Afghan girls. But I must say that this is not, girls' education is not the only problem. We should not really set the bar so low that if Taliban do not really fulfill their commitment to allow our girls to continue school, and one day when they do that, which they are actually using this as a leverage over international community, and once they allow that, the world will think, well, the situation is now normal. And it's okay.
It's not one of the, it's one of the atrocities Taliban are committed. Extrajudiciary killing, exclusion of ethnic groups, exclusion of social, groups, religious groups, a government that is not legitimate, basic, a government that is not based on the will of people. These are much more greater problems. But of course, girls' education, because in 21st century, this is happening. And this is happening in a country that you have invested billions of dollars and lives.
But Fawzia, I agree with, I 100% agree with everything you've just said. But if I said Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Qatar, it strikes me that they have, maybe UAE, have potentially unique leverage over.
Yes.
What should those countries be doing?
You know, Qatar, because we were there for one year on and off, they have 12% more female students or girls in education institutions than boys. Saudi Arabia now has, I mean, I'm not talking about their government, but they have opened to, you know, women exercising their rights. UAE, their ambassador, my friend, Ambassador Lana in UN, their permanent representative does not even wear a scarf. So it's not only Afghanistan that by oppressing women you protect Islam. I think they have their ways. I think Qatar has a lot of leverage. I think Pakistan, because I mean, for most of the Taliban, they still have their family members living in Pakistan. I don't think they have moved the Quetta Shura to Afghanistan. And I think the Taliban claim that they want Islamic Emirate of Pakistan is serious. They have been fighting in the border areas recently. So I think before that flame, which is now in Afghanistan, goes to any of these countries, they must become vocal, not only in statements, because we have been hearing these nice statements from all these member states. But then when it comes to practical steps, like engaging with Taliban on a condition base, tell them that if you don't do these things, you're not going to have a good future. Not only in terms of from a political theory also, I mean, politics of exclusion is not going to be sustainable, and that's a reality. Taliban are now, implementing a politics of exclusion where they exclude everybody from politics, basically,
Fawzia,
from social life even.
Fawzia, there's a sense in Washington, I asked Special Representative West this, he was more, I'm going to describe it as more optimistic about this, and that there's a fear in Washington that I believe that when if we leave a vacuum, China and Russia have the ability to fill it, and they will attempt to do that. In some ways, they've done this diplomatically by recognizing the Taliban. You were talking about this. But to put it simplistically, it seems as if in many parts of the world, China, if they're given an opportunity, will stick a straw in a country and suck out the rocks or suck out the minerals, et cetera. So there's a sense that China has a lot of interest in the minerals of Afghanistan. What kind of involvement does China have right now? What kind of leverage does China have right now? We have a lot of interest, as you know, here in Washington, even more so than 5 years ago, and certainly more than 10 years ago, in China, in the Chinese Communist Party in mainland China. How do you see mainland China's involvement in Afghanistan?
A lot of countries from the region and far that are now engaging with Taliban in the way that give them recognition, give them the power to maneuver and to bypass the West. These interests are economic interests, obviously, because Uzbekistan hosted in late July, they hosted a conference, which a lot of these countries with economic interest went there. And the hope was that the Uzbeks and countries in the region will achieve something in terms of women's rights and girls' education, but we all know that the main focus of that conference was also on economic interest of the region. So that's my fear. My fear is that if once Taliban start these kind of bilateral and transparent relationship with different countries in the region, including China, then the West and the US will ultimately lose its leverage, which is already very small. And that's why I think before we reach to that point, which is on the way, because I know that a lot of Chinese investors are in Afghanistan. They are, not even in a bidding process, interested in Afghanistan minerals. Afghanistan has billions of dollars underground, but still, a rich country, a poor nation, unfortunately. So I think we need to really engage for a political settlement that we establish a government that is accountable and avoid all these untransparent relationships.
I want to come back to that at the end about what that looks like. There have been some folks who've used the term diaspora. Do you consider yourself part of an Afghan diaspora?
Once in my conversation with Special Envoy Tom West, I told him that, don't call me diaspora, because whenever I hear this, it's like you're shooting with a pistol in my brain. Because you guys sent planes to evacuate. I wish there was no evacuation. I wish we were in Afghanistan in the full front, like really fighting and trying to change even if it's with cost of our lives, to change the status quo. But anyways, I don't agree, because Taliban were out of Afghanistan for 20 years, more than 20 years, and they were regarded as leaders of Afghanistan.
And they were never called
as the
diaspora.
reality, as the only reality, I would say sometimes, because some of our partners say, well, Taliban are the only reality. Probably they are the reality, but maybe 15% of the realities of Afghanistan. So if they were in Afghanistan, why double standard? Why Taliban being outside the country for 25 years were still regarded as leaders, and we spending 80% of our times still inside Afghanistan, trying to help people in our own way, trying to help people get out, trying to motivate people who are actually at risk, manage protesters. In fact, when I was here in the US at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 days ago, I received a call from girls who were protesting in Mazar-e-Sharif, along with many other people who are abroad, receiving the same calls at 3 a.m. These girls were locked down in dormitory, and they asked me for support. I mean, what can I do from miles away, to help these girls? But that shows the level of trust and hope that is connected to us from inside Afghanistan. So why are we the diaspora? Why do you think we are diaspora? We have left Afghanistan in protest to what was happening. I left not because I was scared of what was happening. No, I didn't leave because of my security situation, although I was under house arrest, and you know that.
Yes.
But I left because of the fact that I wanted to show my protest for the way Taliban wanted to govern.
Where were you August 15th?
In Kabul.
And what
in
happened?
My home.
What happened?
It was a tragic day, and all of us get emotional when we remember that day.
I know.
I think the fall of Kabul did not really happen on the 15th of August. And I don't think actually it was a fall in Kabul. I think it was a handover of Kabul. Let's put it that way. Handover by former president. I think it happened, the fall of Afghanistan started from the time that the US-Afghanistan deal was negotiated, with excluding the Afghan people, the people of Afghanistan, the women of Afghanistan, the government, which was elected. They were not included. And when we were talking with American diplomats that why you are not briefing, why we are not included, why there is no simultaneous negotiation, and the response we got was it is about Taliban, the US matters. And one of those Taliban US matter was obviously in the Doha Agreement, and it was withdrawal of your troops, which was not Taliban US matter. It was Afghanistan's matter. It was our future. So it was important for us to be engaged in that. And therefore, I think it started from then, expedited when on the 13th of April, President Biden said that I'm going to withdraw no matter what happens.
Was President Biden given a difficult situation by former President Trump?
I think the way Afghanistan case was filed was really not very responsible by both presidents, I must say. But in the Doha Agreement, I mean, the United States violated the Doha Agreement, Taliban violated more, because in the Doha Agreement it says that the withdrawal will be condition-based, conditional withdrawal. And one of the conditions was a political settlement to reach. There were 4 elements, and I remember the popular statements. There are my sisters and brothers from Afghanistan who would also remember from Ambassador Khalilzad, who would say, nothing will be agreed upon until everything is agreed upon. And the 4 elements that were interconnected to agree upon was withdrawal, condition-based, political settlement, and of course prisoners release, and disassociation of Taliban with other military extremist groups, and explicitly they mention Al-Qaeda, which we know none of it is actually happening. And the Americans left.
I mean, Zawahiri was there. We got him, thankfully, but the fact he seemed to be pretty comfortable in Kabul, he seemed to be
close to the palace.
Pretty close to the
palace.
palace.
He's not the only one there.
God. It's awful. Fawzia, there are some that say the only way to respond to the problem of the Taliban is to take up arms. What do you think about that? I don't think we should want another war. There's been 40 years of war. What is your response when people say we should take up arms against the Taliban?
I am in this movement of liberty and freedom by standing and protesting in the streets or protesting in our own way. So I'm in support of those women and men who are standing for their rights in a civic way. However, that being said, there are people who actually were pushed to the corner and left with no choices, but to make harder choices. Picking a gun is a hard choice because they know that they are actually playing with their lives, but they were pushed to that corner. And my fear is that, again, if we do not really have a response in a way that there is a political settlement, this is going to go to a civil war. And in a civil war, it's not only Afghanistan that will be impacted. Like before 2001, it's the global security that will be impacted.
So do you think we will, so some people have said it's not a question of if but when having a civil war again in Afghanistan. Do you believe that?
Well, there is war. There is active war in some parts of Afghanistan. It's just a matter of time, I think. There are more people that are unhappy. And in fact, when this 50 of our girls were killed last week from our Hazara community, there was a huge activism, civic activism, to say it was a genocide. But there were some others who were also talking about picking an arm if they're not protected in their own country. So everyone is thinking of hard choices. And as I said before, the only movement that probably believes in civic activism is the women movement, and we are also not taken seriously. So sometimes probably the women of Afghanistan should also pick up a gun.
Okay. Okay.
If that's the only...
Well, that woke me up. That got my attention.
If that's the only way we are taken serious, we should probably do that.
Okay. Well, this is... okay, so... Fawzia, there's been, the United Nations has played a role in Afghanistan in different ways. The current United Nations footprint is called UNAMA. Could you talk about what is the role that UNAMA is playing? Is it playing a constructive role? What do you think about UNAMA?
So UNAMA is like the lead coordinating body in Afghanistan. Their mandate expired last March, and all the women organizations, women rights activists, the main, we really lobbied. I remember how many Zoom meetings I had to arrange and attend with, at home sometimes I'm called like Zoom. That's my second name because it's like 24 hours on the Zoom meeting. Thanks to those member states in the UN.
Fawzia Zoom Koofi.
Exactly.
That's your nickname.
It's a new name. We're grateful for those countries who actually help us to have a stronger mandate, not only extend UNAMA mandate, but make it stronger.
Which did happen.
Which did happen. And this happened actually just 1 week before the Ukraine issue became more sensitive, which further divides the Security Council. So if it was delayed for another week, probably we wouldn't have the same way a strong mandate as we have now. But we got it. So UNAMA mandate focuses on a political dialogue, human rights, and humanitarian. What they have been doing is only humanitarian because that's the easy thing to do. Humanitarian, right? They haven't done really much on human rights. They published a report in June, which is not very comprehensive. There is a new SRSG, which we are very looking forward to working with her because it's a woman, and she's from the region, and she's a Muslim woman, and
What's
she
her
was
name?
used to Rosa Atanbayeva. She was the
from Kyrgyzstan.
She was the president of
Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan or President of Kyrgyzstan?
President of democratic president of Kyrgyzstan. So she is from the region. She is Muslim. We are hoping with her, footstep in Afghanistan, we will be able to work for a more stronger mandate on human rights, but also on political.
So Kyrgyzstan has a effervescent democracy. So she was democratically elected.
Yes.
Muslim woman from Kyrgyzstan is the UN representative in Afghanistan.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
That's a strong message for Taliban.
Totally. Okay, should the U.S. and other international players have offices in Afghanistan to deal directly with the Taliban, or should we work only through UNAMA?
I think it's engagement with Taliban must be conditions-based. Taliban tell us, I'm just quoting them, that you guys lobby with international community so much for your rights and you think the world is listening to you. They're not listening to you. We have a very good relationship with the world. EU is in Afghanistan. It's just a recognition. Otherwise, we have a very good relationship. So the more you actually try to make it easy and the more your engagement is not on the basis of give and take, the more normalized the situation becomes with Taliban, the more Taliban think that they're doing okay, that they're doing good. and they wouldn't bother to really keep their commitments. So I think UNAMA, they have a mandate to work with people. They really have to work with people, because I don't think actually they are now engaging so much with the people. I wonder how many group of women the UNAMA has met in the last 6 years. They have obviously met a lot of Taliban. So, but when it comes to your presence, your embassy presence, your diplomatic presence, I think it goes against the international standards. If you are not recognizing a power, how do you, or a de facto authority, how do you have your presence there? That's what Taliban are desperately looking for. And that's why they are sometimes giving the message that, we want girls to go to school, because they want your presence, they want your money. But they're not serious and honest on what they say about women's rights.
Okay, so here's my last question, then I've got several questions from the audience. But there was an ongoing, so you could argue there's been an ongoing conflict in Afghanistan since 1979. That's a really long time. So both you and I'm not going to say what our ages are, but both you and I were children when that happened. And
no, I was born after that.
You were born after that. Of course you were. Of course you were. Of course you were born after that. So absolutely. So you were born after that, of course. So is peace possible in Afghanistan? And what does a peaceful outcome look like in Afghanistan? Because this seems as if this has gone on for a really long time. What does this look like? I'm not asking for Sweden. I'm not asking for Switzerland. Okay. So I'm not. But I don't know. Bangladesh. Why can't Afghanistan be like Bangladesh?
Yeah. A peaceful, prosperous Afghanistan where every human being will be regarded as human being, regarding their, ethnic, religious, color, race, whatever, was something that I wanted to see as a result of my engagement with Taliban. I know a lot of civil society activists and women rights activists, they were against my engagement. They said, don't legitimize Taliban. Don't give them that whitewashing, opportunity. They have not changed. But we wanted to bring a peaceful settlement for our country because, at the end of the day, all of us were victims of war. I went to negotiation, in fact, my hand in cast as a result of Taliban attack.
You were stabbed?
Yeah, as a result of,
and your bodyguard was killed?
He was injured. So I was several times attacked. In the last one, my hand was injured. But I wanted to demonstrate as a victim of war also, along with millions of Afghans.
And when they saw you, they were unhappy to see you. They had hoped you had died, right? They were surprised. Isn't that true? That's what you told me? You showed up at the negotiations. They were shocked to see you because they thought you were dead, right? Is that right? Isn't that true?
Exactly. Well, they shot me because they wanted
that,
to.
Right? So she shows up at the negotiations and they're like, hey, I'm so unhappy to see you because we tried to kill you and we're so sorry about that. It's basically what happened, right?
It didn't happen.
And they're like, oh, right? So think about that. I mean, how messed up is that?
Thousands of other women and men were targeted and killed. Journalists, judges, the cream of our society.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting that they were killed.
It's so offensive. It's so gross.
There is still a small window of opportunity for a peace. But we all have to really work toward that, right? Get out of our box of humanitarian aid for Afghanistan, but work for a political settlement. So engage with women of Afghanistan, engage with political community of Afghanistan, so that they start mobilizing. Because 1 year we were scattered around the world, because it was an unexpected situation.
Zoom.
We have Zoom, but also we are now out of our, administrative procedure. We have kind of a time to breathe and think about what's going to happen in our country, and then include Taliban as a small reality in that process. Because obviously we cannot, there are a lot of people who believe in dismantlement of Taliban. And when I, consult them on what should I say in these kind of platforms, they're like, tell Americans to dismantle Taliban. So you have many people in Afghanistan who believe that way. I personally believe that we need to work with this small reality, which are Taliban, 10 to 12% probably. They can be one reality, but the rest of the society form a government based on the will of people. So I met a congressman the other day in the US Congress, and he told me that, for us, Afghanistan is a failed democracy project. I said, probably the US failed in its strategy of bringing democracy in Afghanistan or helping people of Afghanistan achieve democracy. But the people of Afghanistan did not fail in their desire to achieve a democratic
They want a democracy.
They still want the democracy. And if the situation continues like this for another 5 years, ordinary people I'm talking, start questioning us, their so-called leaders, saying that, did you leave us with these kind of people, with Taliban? Where is your democracy? They will even start questioning our values. So before they start questioning our values and they lose complete faith on us, we really need to do something to restore democracy and restore constitutional order, because Afghanistan is the only country that does not have a constitution.
Okay, so here's, how do you get the Afghan political class to join together in a united front to challenge the Taliban?
They have started. They have started, I must say. We now need to mobilize more women, because this is about women. The women of Afghanistan are writing the new history. We like it or we don't like it. The political community of Afghanistan, these kind of patriarchy, traditional men, if they want to believe it or if they don't want to believe it, the new history in Afghanistan will be written by women of Afghanistan. Because they were in the full front of standing against oppression. And some of these men were actually looking at them and saying that, and just looking at them, not even joining their protest. They think the women are only fighting for women's rights, which in reality, last day's protest, not in big numbers, because it's a very difficult situation, I must say. But even if 200 women is protesting in Afghanistan, that means 200 women know that they're not going to come live home. But they still take that risk. So I think women of Afghanistan should be 50% of those dialogue and negotiation. This is for first, and political. Second, we need to give space. I know that a lot of political community and civil society activists, they're struggling in their situation. There is no office for them. There is no resources for them. And many countries are electing because they want to have an economic tie with Taliban. They don't want to upset Taliban. So we really need to get serious into this business of bringing constitutional order, rule of law back to the society, to Afghanistan.
Fawzia, thank you so much. You're amazing. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Fawzia Koofi. Thank you.